Bloodborne is beloved by countless fans and is often in conversations of the greatest Souls game alongside Elden Ring, but in my eyes, the boss roster in particular is often overlooked and people neglect to acknowledge how poor the quality of some of these fights truly is, but we'll explore all that in today's video. I hate this boss. The fight itself is as repulsive as the boss's design. I would be okay with having to kill the regular enemies around the arena if the One Reborn was actually a well-designed fight. I never hated it in the Tower Knight. As it stands, it's just a chaotic mess of flailing limbs that doesn't even pose any form of challenge. There's a theme in the lowest tier of this list. Many of the bosses will have regular enemies dumped in the arena. It almost makes it seem like it's not a good design trait. But what do I know? I've never come up with a boss that rivals the masterpiece that is the Royal Rat Authority. Dear God, I despise this stupid, decaying, shriveled prune of a man. Seriously, what is his problem? His moveset is passable, but the fight presents you with two options. Combo him into a corner and trivialise the fight, or try to fight him properly and get one shot by the cool beyond. It just sucks. I actually like having to trap him, and think it makes the fight far more memorable, but on repeated attempts it just becomes annoying. He's not as despicably awful as the lower entries, but man, I really wish this fight didn't exist. The presentation surrounding this fight is fantastic. Rom has a stunning arena, enticing cutscene following the fight, and leaping to the lake to find the boss is such a cool way to find him. Unfortunately, the combat is just lackluster. It's yet another boss that throws regular enemies at you, relying on them primarily to pose a threat. Rom's own move pool isn't terrible, but it's far from passable, and when paired with the large number of leaping spiders, this boss becomes incredibly annoying to fight. This boss really annoys me. Presentation, great. Lore, great. Combat, abysmal. The attack that brings your health way down is very interesting, but not good. Especially when comparing the secret final boss to that which came before it, Gehrman. The fight just gets overshadowed in every aspect. At least their name is fitting. They really are an utter failure of a boss. They hit far harder than a gank boss ever should, have incredible range and too much health. Their movesets aren't terribly designed unlike the bosses below them. It's just the way FromSoft made the failures utilise their attack pools in conjunction with one another that makes them incredibly boring to fight. They do have a pretty great soundtrack though. My pick for the easiest boss in Bloodborne, and one of the easiest fights in the entire series. The witches are an incredibly dull fight. I distinctly remember my friend Shortman dying to this boss on his first attempt, and me mocking him relentlessly for it. They're not an offensive fight, but as with many of the entries at this point of the list, they're just unbelievably dry. Celestial Emissary lands slightly above the witches purely because they're a little more visually distinctive. I do think it's a slightly more challenging encounter, but that's by no means me calling them difficult. They're an uninspired gank with nothing unique that makes me believe they deserve to be any higher. The Wet Nurse's greatest strength is the spectacular presentation of the fight. The score is one of my favourites for how unique and ominous it is, in contrast to most of the series. Unfortunately, this boss can potentially be the final fight of the game, and it pales in comparison to Gehrman. It's admittedly much better than the Moon Presence, but that's not a massive point in this encounter's favour. It's mechanically dull, deals way too much damage, and even then, it's just a jokingly easy waiting game of booty smacking. Paul is an incredibly unique boss. His visual design manages to stand out among the amazing roster of Bloodborne designs. That being said, I don't love the fight itself. I tend to be partial to humanoid duel style fights over erratic beast bosses, and Paul is about the most erratic a boss can be, so he's held back despite his awesome design. Bloodstarved Beast is a boring boss. His design is really cool and his moveset isn't particularly badly designed, though the poison is a little frustrating. The issue with this fight is just that he's not all that engaging to combat. Maybe it's just me being averse to Bloodborne's beast fights, but there's just nothing to make me like this fight all that much. Logarius is a boss I can't help but feel is a little overrated by the community at large. He's undoubtedly cool, and his moveset is solid, but I don't think he comes anywhere close to the quality of Bloodborne's best bosses. His worst attack is certainly the sword rain, but I do also find the explosive skull to come out far too quickly at times. Overall, he's a decent boss with a solid design, but definitely not as strong as many claim in my eyes. Vicar Amelia was my first ever Soulsborne Stonewall. She made me sideline Bloodborne and start playing Dark Souls 3. I came back to her months later, discovered that upgrading weapons existed, slapped on some fire paper and beat her very easily. She's a solid boss. Her cutscene is honestly haunting and the presentation is great, introducing us to the church related aspects of Bloodborne. I don't love her moveset and it can be somewhat difficult to see what she's doing, but overall I think she's a good early boss. Ebrietas is a slightly overrated encounter in my opinion. I do appreciate it, but find it mechanically average. The presentation of the fight is pretty great, and the combat is serviceable at least, but since it falls so far short of what this boss could have been, I don't feel I can justify Ebrietas being higher on my list. The greater Amygdala fought on the path to the childhood's beginning ending is one of the more unique fights in the game, being an incredibly unorthodox encounter in comparison to most Souls bosses. It takes the most damage when attacking its head, but that puts the player directly in the path of its attacks, which deal impressive damage. Therefore you have to choose between dealing less damage and attacking the legs, being less at risk from the boss's attacks, or attacking the head and risking getting your health bar shredded. This provides a greater deal of player freedom that brings the fight above those below it, alongside its great design and significance within the lore of the game. The Shadows of Yharnam are Bloodborne's only good gank fight, and one of the series' better attempts at the formula. The large tombstone really is the saving grace of the fight, providing a much needed method to break up the aggro of the trio, and protect yourself from the ranged Shadows fireballs. The three bosses' movesets mesh well together, and all serve very distinct purposes within the fight. Sometimes the ranged Shadow can make the fight a little frustrating, but the Gravestone does mostly alleviate this issue. The snake attacks at the end of the fight bring it down substantially, as they feel rather broken and unfair to dodge, but overall this is definitely one of FromSoft's better gank fights. Having just started playing my first Souls game, I was confused on which direction to go in central Yharnam. I turned to my friends who introduced me to the series for help, and they told me to go to the end of the bridge through the house. I followed their instructions and found myself getting jumped by the Cleric Beast. I think I may have had the worst heart attack of my life. 3 minutes later and the Cleric Beast had been swiftly disposed by my Sword Cleaver and unbridled hatred for monkey-like beings. Overall, it's a great tutorial boss, which introduces the themes of Bloodborne incredibly well. I think it's actually gotten harder for me on repeat playthroughs, though it's still too easy to just hug that booty and keep swinging until those sweet blood echoes drop.
You unkindled are all the same. You watch my videos every week, yet never once do you take your blades to that subscribe button. You are content to let me rot atop this mountain of unclicked buttons, to let me suffer for eternities to come until every boss has been ranked from worst to best. I did not wish for it to end this way. Why couldn't you have simply subscribed?
As far as I've seen, Laurence is one of the most polarising bosses in the series. I'm on the side of the people who really enjoy him. His moveset is pretty great, he has an excellent soundtrack, and call me Dazza because I'm a sucker for whacking flames on things to make them cooler. I don't find him nearly as difficult as people claim him to be, though he still poses a noteworthy challenge. Despite how good I consider this fight to be, he's still ranked as the 4th best of the 5 Old Hunters bosses, which should really demonstrate the immense quality of FromSoft's DLC bosses. By many considered to be the hardest boss in the series, even to this day, Orphan of Kos is definitely a fight that lives up to the high standards set by the Old Hunters DLC. The breathtaking visuals are set as soon as you enter the fight, with the haunting face of the Astral Clock Tower looming over the gorgeous coastal arena as you take on one of Bloodborne's classic eldritch monstrosities. This is paired with the disturbing sound design, as the Orphan swings his dead mother's placenta at you, screeching and roaring in a manner that can make any Souls veteran quake in their boots. The immense difficulty and excellent combat mechanics of this encounter highlight the true horror of fighting this great one, and it's a daunting challenge that cements itself as one of From Software's most memorable experiences to this day. Gehrman is a boss praised primarily for his presentation, but his gameplay absolutely holds up. The visuals of the fight are incredible, the cutscene prior is fantastic, and the score is flawless. The difficulty of the encounter is admittedly not on par with other bosses at this level of the list, but parrying him is just so satisfying that I love the fight regardless, and I'm always the first to say that difficulty isn't everything. I wouldn't have thought that a decaying old man in a wheelchair could be such a thrilling encounter, but Gehrman really does distinguish himself from the rest of Bloodborne's main game bosses. That being said, there's one from the main game and a couple from the Old Hunters DLC that surpass even the heights of the game's climactic boss fight. Most players will encounter the Cleric Beast first, but Gascoigne is the first mandatory boss of Bloodborne, and he's my favourite introductory boss in the series. While Gascoigne doesn't teach the game's mechanics quite as well as Genichiro, I personally prefer his moveset. Parrying him is always enjoyable, and the shifting between his small axe and large axe, which potentially mirrors the player's own weapon should they choose the Hunter's axe at the start of the game, makes the fight incredibly engaging. The second phase is undeniably the weakest part of the fight, but it's still a pretty well designed encounter when compared to the rest of Bloodborne's base game bosses. I'm definitely a little biased towards Gascoigne, with Bloodborne being my first Souls game and him being the first boss that truly engaged me with the style of these games. I'd argue that Gascoigne is the reason I'm so obsessed with FromSoft today, and for that and his incredible design, he lands a coveted spot as my favourite boss in Bloodborne's base game. Ludwig is one of two bosses I consider the perfect embodiment of FromSoft boss design, with the other being my favourite in the series, who we'll explore in a later video. He has a design that tells a story perfectly, and the arena accentuates this so well. He has one of the best phase transition cutscenes in all of Souls, and the flow of the fight blends perfectly with the incredible soundtrack that showcases the lore and qualities of the boss through audio, a trademark of FromSoft's highest quality bosses. The Moonlight Greatsword is such a nice addition to his design, the teal glow distinguishing the fight from many of the dark bosses of Bloodborne. I personally prefer the second phase of the fight, being more in line with the honourable jewels I'm so fond of. Ludwig is seen by so many Soulsborne fans as the peak of their boss design, and while I don't find his moveset as fun to engage with as the few bosses I have higher, he still takes a decisive position among my favourite video game bosses of all time. In my opinion, Lady Maria is the height of Bloodborne. She truly perfected the fast-paced and aggressive combat of the game, with her nimble moveset. I do wish she had more posture in the first phase, so you couldn't stunlock her quite so easily, but it isn't a detriment to my enjoyment of the fight. Maria's attacks are all nearly perfectly designed, and I'm a sucker for cool bosses with dual swords. Her usage of Bloodflame is one of the coolest aesthetics in Bloodborne, and on top of that, all her moves are mechanically engaging, and create an incredible flow to her fight. As with all the bosses at the top of the list, her visual and environmental storytelling is unparalleled by anyone besides FromSoft, with her sins being hinted at throughout the preceding level and her desperation to hide them from you as she descends into the use of blood arts, highlighting her tragic yet haunting lore. This is anchored in the soundtrack, which is one of my favourites in the game with one of my favourite OSTs of all time. Lady Maria is an unbelievable step up from most of Bloodborne's bosses and is completely deserving of her spot at the top of the list. That concludes my ranking of Bloodborne's main bosses from worst to best. I've omitted the Chalice dungeon fights from this video since, while they do qualify as bosses, I expect many of my viewers won't care to see my placements for them. I know exactly where they sit on the list, but let me know if you're interested in seeing a video covering them. As always, I must remind you that this list is simply my opinion on a subjective medium and is no more or less valid than anyone else's, so please keep it respectful in the comments below. I appreciate you making it this far and would appreciate a like and subscribe even more so. It truly helps a lot with the algorithm. I hope I'll see you in our next boss ranking.